Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast, and welcome to a man who is living right now in the past in Detroit, Michigan, or outside Detroit. It's it's probably about 7:45 p.m. on a Thursday evening. Mr. Walter Crosby, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been I'm looking forward to this.
Looking forward to this as well. So, for the listeners' benefit, you are the Chief Executive Officer of Helix Sales Development, working with CEOs and business owners, helping with sales leadership, and all things sales. So we're going to talk about all of that today. You also are the host of a podcast. So you're a very experienced podcaster known as Sales and Cigars. So I'm sure I'd have to talk about that as well. I'm not a cigar smoker. I've had a few, but I'd love to get the origins of that story. But before we jump into the content, and Walter, as you saw, I had a heap of questions to ask you as you saw my blank piece of paper before we press record.
That's awesome.
Love to get a bit of background from you. So your background and specifically what has led you to running what you do today at Helix Sales Development.
A salesperson fell backwards into sales. I like a lot of salespeople, right? I graduated from university with an economics degree, right? So what do you do with that? You go to grad school or you go into sales. And I just had somebody like, hey, what are you going to do? And I have no freaking idea what I'm going to do. And he's like, well, why don't you think about sales? And it was in real estate, and one thing led to another. And I've been in sales management for 40 years, selling dirt, buildings, systems, and myself. So it's been, I come from a blue collar background. First person in the family to go to college, and my GPA reflected that initially. Because I don't have to go to class. Oh, okay, cool.
Exactly.
And yeah, that I woke up pretty fast, but college prepared me for nothing in particular, and it was just interesting. I could go talk to people, and make money, and I made more money if I worked harder. I made more money if I worked smarter. I made more money if I aligned myself with people who could provide me guidance. So it's just been an interesting journey, and I started Helix in 2016, out of frustration. The story really goes, I had a really great job that made a nice living that I absolutely hated. Just hated going to work. It was just an awful place. And I left to go work with a startup because I thought that would be fun. And I sold all the stuff that they had built, and then they couldn't build anything else.
Wow.
So the startup kind of failed. It never started, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So I realized I was going to have to go back out and work for an asshole again. So I figured that might as well be me. And I had some conversations with people, and I realized that there was a problem that sales managers were often promoted from a sales position, and they were often promoted because they were a top salesperson. Happened to me a couple times, and I'm like, well, sales managers need help.
Yeah.
So I figured out some ways to help them, and started making calls, and then I realized in about 3 weeks that they don't have any money. They don't have a budget. So I had to pivot and talk to the owners and the business owners, the entrepreneur, the CEOs, And I had to help them see that they didn't understand that they were promoting one of their top salespeople, and that person didn't necessarily understand how to do the job.
Yeah.
They were great at sales. They didn't know how to manage people. They didn't have a process per se.
Yeah.
And so you frustrated the team, you frustrated the individual, you frustrated yourself, and that person ended up leaving and going to a competitor. And it was it's kind of a mess. So I was trying to solve that problem. And I work with sales managers. I work as a fractional sometimes,
Yeah.
and it's been a fun journey.
It's interesting you say that the I guess the blueprint where, and it's probably not all sales leaders come from individual sales contributor roles where they've been successful, but the vast majority of them do because the business looks at that person. Walter, you're very successful, you're top of your game. We're now going to give you the responsibility of running a team, and if you get the team to do exactly what you've done, then they'll get the great results. So they just look at the top line. We're going to expand this business, and everything's going to be fantastic. But we're not going to give you any help in doing that. We're not going to let you know, and that the skill set required to lead people is in many cases different to the skill set required to be a salesperson, even though you're
Mhm.
still in the same, I guess, sphere or role, selling a product or selling a service. But did you find in your experience, because when I talk to a lot of sales leaders who have been promoted into that role, they find it difficult to let go of the sale. And so they start to still want to be part of the hunt, or they're still part of the or be part of the conversion, and not knowing how to step back. Was that something that was difficult for you, or did you find that a little bit easier in terms of transition?
It wasn't difficult for me, but I see it a lot today where I call it that sales manager wants to be the hero.
Yeah,
Um, and for some reason, maybe because I played sports when I was younger, and the coaches that I had in sports were trying to make everybody better.
yeah,
So my idea was if I can make these guys better and these gals better, and they can think for themselves, then I'm going to win faster and I'll be more efficient
yeah.
with my time. So I kind of focused on the coaching part first instead of the
Hmm.
management side.
Mm,
It was more of the coaching, and I would sort of give them my coaching style was questions,
yeah.
and it worked. And I had to learn how to do the management side of it, but I never felt compelled to go do because it just didn't seem like it was scalable.
Mm. So with that, because there'll be a lot of organizations that, well, certainly in Australia, I'm sure there might be some in the US, where you've got, just because of the size of the business, you've got a sales manager and you've got a sales team, but the sales manager also carries an individual target. So they do a bit of a hybrid role. Is that something you've come up against, and what are some of the challenges, if so, that a sales manager in that position has to grapple with?
Well, time is the big piece, right? Because if you're still a producer, and they still expect you to do what you were doing,
Mm,
plus manage all those knuckleheads, then it, it's a real challenge, and something's gonna suffer. Even if you put in twice as much time, you're still gonna have your focus on producing because that's where the dollars are coming from. So I think the model is if you need that person to still sell,
mm,
then maybe you shouldn't have a sales manager. Maybe you should get somebody coming in on a part-time basis to help manage that team or
yeah,
coach that person so that you can keep that person doing what they do really well,
yeah,
and that's generating revenue. And maybe they can be a leader. Maybe they can
mm,
support the other team members, but it's just often they're promoted and the expectations aren't reasonable, and we're dumb enough to take the job.
mm,
When my very first sales management job, I I was at a holiday party, and the bosses came by and said, "Hey, can we see you at the bar?"
yeah,
Oh, crap. So I told my wife, "Get your purse and stuff because this might be bad." So they offered me to be the sales director for international for the two countries, and I was dumb enough to take it. and because on the way home, I was explaining to my wife what they were doing and what I was going to have to do. And she's
Yeah.
like, that's great. Have you ever managed anybody before?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it was just like, boom,
Yeah.
she burst the balloon. And I'm like, no. She's like, because you could kind of barely manage yourself. How are you going to go manage the other five people? It's not wrong. She wasn't wrong.
But
And
it's
and I'm
feedback designed to serve.
yeah. So what I realized though is that if that happened at during the Christmas break, so to speak, and I had to I started reading things. I started looking for opportunities to find support
Yeah.
to get better at that because I literally she pointed out a clear fact. I just didn't know what
Yeah.
I was going to do.
Yeah.
So it took a while, but I was able to develop the skill set, and I today I love watching a salesperson get better.
Mm.
Like when they call me on a Friday afternoon from being on the road and they're like, "Hey, you know that thing we talked about on Monday? I tried it."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah, and it worked." I'm like, "Well, why are you surprised?" Right? And then they tell me a story
Yeah.
about, how they got a PO or they closed a deal or whatever. And I mean, like that makes my week when something that you coach them on, um, comes to fruition
Mm.
and you hear the excitement in their voice.
Yeah.
That's when you know you're doing something that makes a difference.
It's brilliant. So going back to that conversation at the bar with the guys who say we're going to put you in a sales director role. Did you ever? Because I'm always curious about this. Do we ever ask the reason as to why I was given the opportunity? So did you ever find out what they saw in you, or was it just the fact that you were kicking goals, results were left, right, and center, and it was all good?
Well, not initially. I wasn't smart enough to ask that question early, but I found out about it later because I was having lunch with one of the partners. And I'm like, why did we do this?
Hmm.
And he gave me an interesting answer. He's like, you know how to sell, and that's important, but you had business acumen.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood, what was going on in the factory. I understood that, gross margin and net profit. Like I got the
Yeah.
basics.
Yeah.
And he said, when you understand that we're trying to make money and you understand how we do that, it's not all about the top line. Um, I can work with that. And he helped, right? He did provide some guidance along the way
Mm-hmm.
because he knew what he had done.
Yeah.
Um, but I wasn't most of us either like, no, thank you,
Mm.
or absolutely, I'm excited, this will be fun, and then you
Yeah.
realize you don't know what you're doing. So I didn't ask that question.
No. Because it fascinates me, Walter, as to why this pattern keeps repeating itself. Where we go to the well, we think, well, this person who is an well, they don't have to be the top of their game, but typically they're up the top echelon of sales, driving the results. And for some reason, we think, well, they must be the perfect candidate to then take over a leadership role. So I'm always fascinated as to what must be going through people's heads, either that the chief revenue officer or the chief executive officer, in some cases, the head of HR, as to how they make that decision and not give them the transition plan or the blueprint or the skill set or the training or the mentoring to make that transition work. Have you ever discussed this? Because I still don't have an answer.
I don't know that I have an answer, but I have a theory.
Mm,
And I don't know, maybe I might be all wet, but I think that a lot of the folks in those positions you described don't truly understand the role of what a sales manager is and what they're supposed to do.
mm,
And I think there's a lot of folks who, and I spend a lot of time with smaller to mid-sized companies, in that
hmm
5 to $100 million.
Yeah,
And that entrepreneur, that business owner, that CEO is still involved in the business.
yeah,
And some of them think of sales as this black bag of magic, and we don't really understand what happens, right? We just know you guys go out and talk to people and deals close.
yeah.
So I think there's a fear and a misunderstanding of what actually happens. And they don't, there's this level of hope
Mm.
that you'll figure it out. And it's there are people out there that get it and know what they need to do. But I rarely is there you find a business owner who really understands that sales manager should be spending 50-60% of their time coaching the sales team,
Yeah.
working with them side by side, rather than closing business for the team,
Mm.
hiding in a CRM, right? Or doing silly reports for ownership.
Yeah.
I think that I think it's a lack of understanding of what the role really is,
Mm.
and they hope somebody just figures it out.
Mm. Because I also think that they might look at the fact that if I put Walter in, who's been generating X number of sales, if I put him into a more senior position and give him more responsibility and hopefully create some mini Walters, then my upward trajectory will just continue. And so they tend to then focus on, well, it's all about the top line revenue or the underlying profitability, but I won't necessarily think, well, the skill set is completely different. And that's why a lot of people flounder in sales roles or sales leadership roles because they don't know that the role is different and they don't sometimes know what is required of that role. So it's like the blind leading the blind, which is why coaching, mentoring, training, having accountabilities and so buddies is so important. So
Yeah, it in each one of those roles, a CRO, a VP of sales, director, manager, they all have, varying levels of strategy, tactics, coaching,
mm,
right? And they're very specific
yeah,
um, to the company, to the organization, but each role is slightly different.
mm,
And sometimes those lines are blurred,
mm,
and they're just rarely are they given the support
yeah.
that they need.
So there's a couple of topics I'd love to explore with you, and one is talking about specific, I guess, characteristics or responsibilities of a sales leader or sales manager, because there'll be people listening to this who are either new to sales management, have been in the sales leadership role for a while, or have aspirations to be a sales manager. And the whole point of this is to help people become exceptional at what they do. And that is, how do I make the transition to sales leadership? How do I become a fantastic individual contributor and really drive high results? The other topic I wanted to talk to you about was talking to the senior leaders, whether that be a CEO or owner or board, in terms of how we best hire people. So when you look at the CEO, what are some things that you're operating with at a 5 to 100 mil? Is it just 5 to 100 mil? You say the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Um, Organizationally, what are you working with those guys on when it comes to bringing in people or building a sales team or expanding a sales team? What are some things that you've got from your expertise and experience that can help, I guess, target or help target the right caliber of person for an organization?
I think there's a couple of basic principles that apply across the board, regardless of the industry. And one is dispelling a myth, but the other ones are really, really basic. So not all sales roles, if you're looking to build a team, what is it that you want the salesperson that you're hiring, what do you want them to be great at?
Mm.
Because there's a difference between a business development role, account manager, a farmer, and
Yeah.
then that traditional sales that does a little bit of all of it.
Mm.
So if you want them to open up new logos and get new business for you, that's a different skill set. And you need somebody that's going to hunt. You're going to need them to
Mm.
hunt consistently. You're going to be able to talk to decision makers and be consultative and sell value,
Yeah.
right? And they have to be able to get on the telephone, and yes, the telephone still works, and have conversations with people. So it's like when I ask a CEO, like what is it you want them to be great at in this role? They look at
Mm.
me like I want them to sell. They're like, okay, but who are they going to talk to? What do you
Yeah.
want them to do? And you get the little puppy dog head with the turn, like what do you mean? So you have to help them, like it's not a set of job responsibilities and accountabilities.
Mm.
It's like, what are those 4 or 5 key things that they need to do?
Yeah.
So really think about those things, and then you want to attract those people to 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 you. So you do that by writing an ad or a job posting that speaks to those people.
Mm,
And if you write it properly, you can repel the other people that you
mm,
don't want. Right. So if you have the real clear picture of who it is you want and what they need to be great at, and then you target those people with your postings, that's a big piece of it that I think everybody gets wrong. And that the idea that if hiring salespeople and you're doing it the same way as you hire all your other employees,
yeah,
you're gonna make mistakes. You're
yeah,
gonna get false starts because we're different.
mm,
Often that salesperson is a better interviewer than the hiring manager, than the person sitting across from them. I mean,
yes,
come on, you've taken over an interview, I'm sure, in your life by
yeah,
asking questions, and we
totally,
get them to go where we want to go.
yeah,
Um, and that's often the last really good sale that they made at the
mm,
company was the one that they did at the interview. So I think we have to think about what it is that who we're looking for, and then we go about the process of hiring that person differently. So
mm,
what, in a very simple terms, you want to treat the candidates much like a prospect is going to treat your salesperson, right? So there's going to be skepticism.
yeah,
We're really going to be trying to qualify this person. Are they really what we need?
yeah,
So instead of like, we got a great company, we got a
yeah,
great culture, we do all these wonderful things, everybody loves us, you should come work here.
yeah.
Start with help me understand, what it is that you do and how you can help me. Every sales resume has BS in it. Um, we got to find it. I talked to a
100%.
guy the other day. He had top salesperson 3 years a row in the Midwest.
Yep.
And I knew a little bit about the company. I'm like, hey, that's great. Three years in a row. You've been there 4 years. That's awesome. How
Mm,
many people in the Midwest?
yeah.
Oh, just you. Okay. Right.
Just me.
So you give the guy credit for positioning himself well, right? And but it was really a test for me. How
Yeah.
did he handle the question?
Yes.
Right? And he didn't fold. He
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, you got me."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I was the only salesperson, but I was number two in the company." And I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
that's great."
Yeah.
But I love the way he answered it, and he kind of came clean, and he didn't fall apart, and he handled the rest of the interview really
Mm,
well. So that's what we want to do. We want to challenge them early and often, and then when you get to the candidates that you want, then sell the company,
mm,
then sell the role, then sell like how easy it is to sell or whatever your story is. But
yeah.
save that to the end and really qualify these people on the front end. And I think the other thing that is sort of a generic that fits everywhere, unless you're a rocket scientist,
Yeah.
right? And you're selling rocket technology or something super, super technical, industry experience is not very important in a sales role. What is important is their sales skills.
Mm,
But if they know who your buyer is, like if your buyer is a CFO
mm,
and you sell a particular piece of software, you don't need somebody that sold the same kind of payroll software. You need somebody that's also called on CFOs selling them another service
mm,
that because they already know that CFO. They
yeah.
might have a Rolodex of those folks. They know the language. They
Mm,
know the way they think. So if you can articulate what it is that you do and what questions that salesperson is going to need to ask and how you create wins,
yeah.
and you can bring somebody in that's adjacent to your industry, right? That calls on that same buyer, you're you're ahead of the game. And that it's really a myth that you got to have. We're very specific and we're unique, right? Everybody says that. You are, I'm sure, but no.
So why do you
And
think that is, Walter? Why do you think that is that organizations just repeat the same old pattern, must have X amount of years and experience in this particular discipline or this particular industry? Because most of the time it ain't rocket science.
because we let the wrong people write those ads or we let the wrong people think about it. No
Yeah.
offense to the HR folks,
Mm,
but of the organization. They understand salespeople the least.
Mm,
Um, we're trouble, right? We create trouble in the organization. Somebody's always mad at us. So it really needs to it's what's always been done. And it's like that's what they're doing over there. That's what our competitors do. Look, they're writing ads the same way. And
mm,
I was really taught that if your competitor's doing it, stop and
yeah,
do something different.
yeah.
And I think it's a real basic thing. Like it's just everybody does it, so like we're gonna follow along. And
Mm,
sheep do the same thing.
they
And
do.
I don't know.
Well, it's funny.
So
I was talking to a group this morning, and we were talking about some of the characteristics of a leader, and one of them was to be broad-minded. And when you think about the opportunities that that presents by actually casting that wide and not being so focused on having to have a certain amount of expertise in a certain discipline or a certain industry, you now potentially get a much better, I guess, choice of people or talent. But then you've got to be really clear on what is the characteristics of the individual that you're looking for. And so the other stuff, that your products and with respect your industry and with respect your company, we can learn about that. But what I need is a good person who's going to fit this criteria. Are they a good person? Are they a good communicator? Can they have that courageous conversation? Do they persist? What are all the things we're looking for? And not just have they sold this widget in some other business.
yeah, the leadership idea, right? You're looking for characteristics, as you said, and you're looking for that person who can listen
Mm,
and really take in what's being said and make sure that they're and then when they do speak, that are they articulate?
mm,
Are they able to communicate their ideas clearly? Um, I see a mistake with leaders make where they create a really clear picture of their vision, and it's beautiful, right? They got
yep.
everybody to understand it, and they even people who are coming along with them, but they don't share within the organization what that individual can do at their level of function to help fulfill that vision,
Mm,
right? So if you have the example I have is a guy that was worked the shipping dock. He would put the packages together, put all the equipment in, and package it up and ship it out.
yep.
And one day he called me and said, "Hey, the big order that you had, it's going out to the guys." I'm like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm only shipping 5 of the 6 packages." Like, okay, why? And he's like, well, I saw that a couple of the pieces, the product was broken, so I held those back. I sent off the other ones, and I'll send the other ones out tomorrow.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's brilliant. Um, who told you to do that? And he goes, what do you mean? Who told me to do it? It's broken. I'm not going to ship them broken parts. So a long story long, I shared that because I took the box out to the customer the next day and I explained to him
Yep.
what he did. And he's like, he did that on his own? You realize how much time and effort that saved us? I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear to him that he should do that. It was clear to him that it was the right thing to do.
Mm,
So if leaders really, I think, need to think about what the guy on the shipping dock can do, what the receptionist can do to
yep.
help fulfill the core values and the mission and the vision that they have.
Yep.
And in sales, it's the same thing. We have to have the right characteristics to be effective in the role and within the culture of the company.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to segue into that because there's a lot of, and I've seen this in organizations I've been involved in, where you've got a salesperson or maybe a few salespeople who are at the top of their game, but they leave a trail of destruction. So they in some cases are quite toxic. They get the results, and the danger is that, excuse me, senior leaders can look at the excuse me, senior leaders can look at the number and say, hey, this person's delivering the great numbers, but not necessarily be privy to all of the chaos that they're creating within the organization from a cultural perspective. So, in the work that you're doing, how much emphasis do you place onto the importance of not just getting a good person, but making sure that that person is a good cultural fit for the longevity of the business and longevity of the team?
I think within the hiring process, we should bring in other people to the interview process late, but bring them in.
Yeah.
So who they're going to work with. Maybe there's a service department they have to work with. Maybe there's an operations person they have to work with. And
Mm.
we want to get that leader to put eyeballs on the salesperson. But in your example of a toxic person, um, I don't care if they're the top salesperson, they have to go.
Yeah.
Um, because it's not appropriate within the sales organization. I mean, we should be loud, we should be excited, we should be,
Mm.
it should be a boisterous group. And we are going to create a little chaos and we are going to push boundaries, right? And
Yeah.
that's okay as long as we're doing it in a professional manner. But if somebody is just creating chaos and being toxic and just ruining people's um, day on a regular basis, they need to go. I mean, you
Mm.
need to ask them to, are you aware that you're an ass and you're doing these things? And if they can't clean it up, then they got to go.
Yeah.
And I can always find somebody else to find that to create that revenue, but you can lose a lot of other people in the process in your organization by allowing this one toxic person. And the other side of that coin is allowing mediocrity to stick around.
That's it.
Right? If you got somebody that's just like coasting and you got most of your team busting their butt, even if they're not
Mm.
performing, they're out there busting their butt trying.
Yeah.
That guy that's just coasting or gal, they have to go.
Mm.
You can't because you accept that, you lose credibility as a leader.
Yeah. And trust actually gets diminished as well because they think, well, we've now got, well, we said we had a high performance culture, but what we actually have is potentially a medium or mediocre level culture because we allow people to get away with the behavior they're getting away with and there's no consequences. So why would I increase my discretionary effort if I know that, hey, there's nobody's going to be having a conversation with me?
It's accountability, right? I
Yeah.
mean, is what you're describing.
Mm.
And you have to have that within an sales organization. And it's difficult for certain people to have those uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take very much effort, and it takes consistency from a manager or leader role in sales to
Yeah.
create that accountability.
Yeah.
And if you're consistent with it and you're fair with it, and you've created the expectations correctly, then those people will weed themselves out,
Mm.
right? Because they're going to be super uncomfortable that they're being called out on a
Mm.
on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
Like, you missed your number for the last 3 months in a row, and your pipeline hygiene is it's awful.
Yeah.
Like what the hell are you doing every day, right?
Yeah.
And you deal through those three levels. After a while, they're going to just realize that let them be successful at some other organization
Yeah.
and bring the right people in. That's why you
Mm.
always have to be recruiting in sales. You always have to have your ear to the ground. You have to have some level of recruitment going on,
Yeah.
because you never know what's going to happen. And great talent comes along every once in a while, and you got to
Mm.
be able to snag it.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because I heard somebody talking a couple of weeks ago saying that great salespeople are never looking for a new role.
They're working for someone,
They're working for
and
somebody, but they're not in the active market. They're not necessarily putting proposals in or putting job applications in. They're the maybe the average more average ones.
that's why when you're looking for salespeople, everybody in the organization has to be part of that recruitment process.
Mm.
You have to provide an incentive to everybody
Mm.
to, like, do you know a great salesperson? And you have to
Yep.
describe it for people. You have to help it. It's got to be a reasonable program.
Yeah.
But talking to everyone, your vendors, your procurement people can be asking around, right? They have people calling on them all the time. Like,
Mm.
what salespeople call on you in procurement that
Yeah.
are professionals. Because we can teach them our business. It's not that
Mm.
hard. Um, it's hard to teach some of those skills,
Yeah.
and it's hard to teach that professionalism.
Yeah. Nice. So from a leadership then perspective, I know a lot of work you do is coaching and mentoring sales leaders to become better leaders in the sales realm. So thinking about what a sales manager or sales leader needs to get really good at in order to be sustainably successful. And what I say, taking performance to an exceptional level, right? Um, what are some key skill sets or some key areas that they need to focus on? Because what I've seen a lot of sales managers do is waste a lot of time doing a lot of stuff that adds no value.
Hmm. It's true. They run around looking at meaningless KPIs that are lagging
Mm,
indicators. They spend a lot of time doing reports. They go on ride-alongs and don't add any value or
mm,
try to close business. So I think there's a couple of things that uh, foundationally that you need to be effective, to have to be effective as a sales manager.
yeah,
And that is to be able to have a clear sales process that your buyer goes through, this journey that you take them on through your organization.
yeah,
That needs to be clear. It needs to be staged. It needs to have multiple stages and then milestones along the stage and clarity about how you move from one stage to the next. There needs to be gates. There should be at least two gates in your process.
mm,
One to get in,
mm,
right? And because your sales process becomes your sales pipeline,
mm,
and your sales pipeline becomes your revenue forecast.
yeah,
They really kind of just fold to each other. So if you let a bunch of crap into your pipeline and you don't have a gate at your process,
yeah,
you're going to have a bunch of crap. I
mm,
had a guy call me the other day, CEO. He was very frustrated. He goes, our close ratio was 43%. I'm like,
yeah,
well, that's good. Why are you upset? He goes, well, because it dropped to 33%.
mm,
Like, oh, how long? He goes, well, it's been about 3 months. Okay. He goes, can you help me with closing skills? I'm like, yeah, but is that your problem?
yeah,
What do you mean? The closing dropped 10%. It's the problem. Like, I don't know.
mm,
So 20 minutes later, we realized that his sales manager came in and said, we need to have 5 times your revenue number in the pipeline at all times.
yeah,
And so what did the salespeople do? Anybody that could fog a mirror was in there, right?
mm-hmm,
It was just hope. So you can't close deals that are never had a shot to close.
no,
So I was able to show them very quickly that this is what was causing the problem. And if you clean that up and put that gate in the front and be clear about who comes in and why, then your close ratio will go up. And then, so what, the next thing, the next gate is like before you give somebody a proposal, there needs to be clear qualification
yeah,
or not just put paper in the street. So if you don't have that as a sales manager and you
mm,
can't own that, because that becomes your language, how you talk about deals, it becomes your forecast. So you need that as a foundational piece.
yeah,
And ideally that's in a CRM that is effective.
yeah,
Um, and I think the other thing is that they have to have a coaching philosophy. And they have to be willing to coach
mm,
50% of the time. That's really their role is to coach these guys to get better, to help them through a deal. Don't give them answers. Ask them 5 questions. Ask 5 questions every time one of your salespeople walks into your room or any of your employees.
mm,
Ask them 5 questions before you give them an answer because you want them to figure it out for themselves.
yeah,
You want them to own it. And then
mm,
if they walk away with like, I got the answer, they same stupid question again in 3 weeks.
yeah,
So, and those questions are real easy. What have you tried? Have you ever seen this before? Did that work when you tried that? What do you think you should do? Right? It's just some really basic things just to get them their brain to engage
yeah,
and make them think. And if they don't want to be coached, then you might not have the right salesperson.
mm,
So those two things I think are critical for a sales manager because you don't manage people.
yeah,
You manage the process,
yes. You lead the people.
as you know.
It's really interesting you talk about those two foundational things. And I'm just recalling the days when I was in corporate and we're in a business environment, and it was drummed into us as sales leaders to have 3 times your rolling 90-day pipeline as the minimum expectation. And that was almost like if you had that, then everything was okay, and you then could fly under the radar and everything was. And they almost didn't look at your conversion rate, your sales number. They were just more concerned about the sales pipeline. But then when you dig a little bit deeper, and you mentioned use or active use and appropriate use of a CRM system, a lot of the information that was in the CRM system was just waffle. It was rubbish because it was literally the fogging in the mirror principle you talked about. And so when you interrogate the information, there wasn't a lot there, which then led to another problem that the sales manager didn't know then how to how to coach. They were just simply saying, "Hey, you need to make more calls. You need to go and talk to more customers. You need to start to increase your conversion rate. You need to put more stuff in the CRM system." And so we didn't have a culture of coaching. We had a culture of telling people what to do. And there wasn't an understanding of the sales process or the buying journey. It was more a case of we've got this product, go out and talk to your customers about this product because we have to hit our number before the end of the quarter. And so the psychology changed within that organization, and it was all about push, 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 not service, service, service.
Yep. And that's one of the reasons why I really try to stay away from those larger corporate organizations, because that mindset, if you're not internally and you have some juice in the organization,
Mm,
you're turning an aircraft carrier
mm,
in the middle of a harbor.
yeah.
And it's very difficult. The smaller organizations are a little more nimble.
Mm,
You can actually get to the CEO and sit down and like, what are you thinking?
yeah.
Right? You can have a real conversation.
Yeah.
And because those principles are there, and it's like, oh, this is what I was taught, and this is what we're going to do, and just keep banging away. And you know, that's why 54% of salespeople are awful, and you don't want them on your team.
which which comes back to, you're talking about filling a pipeline with the fog of the mirror principle. We just wonder whether organizations do the same thing when they're trying to bring salespeople in there. It looks good on the surface, but they don't actually do any rigor around the characteristics they're looking for.
They want headcount. I got an
Yeah.
empty spot. It's costing me money. And there's lots of figures and lots of different studies on it, but at the end of the day, it's super expensive to make a bad hire.
Mm,
And it's really expensive to do it 3 or 4 times in a row
mm,
because you do it the same way. So if you just make some minor changes to your approach to hiring the salespeople, and you have a foundational elements, and you give your sales manager a fighting chance, um, you can change
mm,
the organization, you can change the outlook, and you can change the performance, because what matters is what comes out of the sales funnel,
mm.
right? It's, you got to put quality in,
Yeah.
and you have to take them through a journey that's meaningful to the buyer,
Mm,
and you got to be able to track it and understand why you're converting things.
yeah.
It's crazy. Like, how do you sell something? It's one of my first questions. How do you sell something around here? And they're like, what are you talking about? We just go talk to people, and it happens. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, right? That's called hope, and it doesn't work. So yeah, there's a lot of we've always done it this way, and our competitors do it, right? And they're successful.
Mm,
Well, I don't know if that's really the valid reason for doing something.
no.
Um,
So you've got those two foundational things, the clear sales process, coaching philosophy. What are some other things that, from your perspective, certainly in the realm that you deal in, that sales managers should be focusing their attention on or doing the majority of their time to be effective, to ultimately drive the business forward?
they have to treat the individual salespeople where they are, right?
Mm,
So if you have a 7, 8 person team, they're not all at the same level.
mm,
They're not all doing things exactly the right way, right? They have different variations of being close to being perfect, right?
yeah.
Nobody's perfect, but they're all doing things in a very specific way. So they have to be able to meet that salesperson where they are and help them elevate to the next level. And I'm coaching a team that there's like a super duper elite salesperson,
Yep.
And then there's like ones that can't find their ass from their elbow. And there's different conversations.
Yes.
There's super different conversations.
Yep.
And and you have to go where they are. And if you can't recognize that and you treat everybody the same way, you're you're going to lose your team.
Mm.
You're not going to be respected. Um, you want to be able to do, right? You want to be able to demonstrate to your team, either, in the recent past, if you've been promoted,
Yep.
or, as you're there, that you know how this works and
Mm.
that you can do it. And occasionally you pick up the phone and make some cold calls with them, go back and forth, you have some fun with them.
Yep.
Um, but if you're not making the environment interesting and fun, because sales is really difficult.
Yeah.
We lose more than we win.
Mm.
Baseball players can make a pretty good living, with a 33% batting average. And salespeople can do something pretty close to that. Not as many millions, but
Yeah.
um, it's one of those situations where you're going to lose a lot more than you win. So you
Mm.
have to be able to keep you got to understand how they're motivated.
Mm.
Some people are extrinsically motivated and some people are intrinsically motivated. So again, you got to meet them where they are and understand them. Sometimes you got to kick people in the ass, and sometimes you got to pat them on the back. And you got to know when to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and you're not going to do it right all the time. So you need to be humble. Your job is to help them at the end of the day. And if you think it's something other than helping your team, um, you got to give them the credit and allow them to experience the wins. Um, I mean, that's a bunch of things that I think all roll into creating a culture.
Which I think is phenomenal. And as you're talking there, I'm just going tick, 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 tick. That's all the stuff that I firmly believe as well, that it's not about you as the leader. You're there to serve them. Sometimes it's giving them a hug. Sometimes it's giving them a twist on the ear to say, "Wait, you need to pull your head in," right? But it's all done because you care about them, because you want to create the best environment for them to flourish, right? To be the best version they can be, and hopefully make a contribution that's meaningful to the business, but also to their customer base. Because the other thing I make, or I try to implore upon sales teams and certainly leaders, is that the sale doesn't end once the sale is made. That's when the sale starts. So you want to have a customer for life. You need to start building some lifetime value into that and know that what you do after the sale will tell you a lot about how often that person or that company is going to come back, but also who they tell.
Well, but that speaks to who you hire too, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like you need to understand how they've treated their past salespeople and how
Mm,
they think. And asking the right questions in an interview helps you understand and glean that. Because
mm,
salespeople will just talk,
yeah.
right? So if you can get that person who really understands what it is that you're trying to accomplish,
Mm,
and that's helping your buyer. And sometimes it's like picking up the phone 3 months after the sale's done,
yeah.
the commission's cleared, the thing's been implemented, it's all fine, and
Yeah.
just stopping by and saying, how's it going,
Mm,
right? It's an opportunity to get an introduction to somebody else, but you're really helping if you're there to make sure everything's going okay.
mm,
You're going to get to get that loyalty that
100%.
that you need as a salesperson.
100%. 100%. So as we kind of bring this to a close, it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that you've got a podcast and
Hmm.
you love cigars. So I'm really curious. You started this was it 2021, the podcast, Sales and Cigars?
Yeah.
So what was the genesis of that? Because it was probably post lockdowns in COVID, but talk to me about how that came about and what's the podcast all about and what's the key drive behind it.
The podcast is about sales and cigars. I mean, literally. So I try to have conversations with CEOs who have problems,
Yeah,
and then I have conversations with people like us who help solve those problems,
yeah.
right? And we're talking about problems and solving them on both sides of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the objective. It's to help provide value to an
Mm-hmm.
audience, to for Walter to learn something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me to have fun.
Yep.
So the genesis of this was involved cigars and alcohol. A really good friend of mine and I were in Florida. We probably had a good chunk of a bottle of bourbon that day, and we were on our second cigar. And he said to me, "We should be recording this." And I'm like, "Why would we record it?" Because we were just sitting at a table outside having cigars and
Okay.
cocktails. And I'm like, "Why would we record this?" He goes, "We're
Yep.
hilarious. This is hilarious. This is fun." And I'm like, "I don't know if we're as funny as you think we are right now." That turned into having a podcast, and he was a visionary, right? Great idea guy,
Yeah.
but not a guy that like would follow through and do
Sure.
something. So I kept chiding it back and forth. Let's actually, it's not a bad idea. Let's do this. We're sober. We can do it. And he just didn't want to put the time into it because it's, as you know, a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the premise. And I don't know, just started calling people I knew at the beginning saying, "Hey, I got this podcast and let's just go have a conversation." And
Yeah.
there's been iterations of it
Mm-hmm.
over time. But it's really about trying to provide some value to my guys, right? And my avatar is a guy. They run a business. They might be
Mm-hmm.
doing 10 million and they want to get to 20. They
Yeah.
might be doing 15, want to get to 40, right? Those are my guys. I
Mm.
want to help them.
Mm.
And they usually have some understanding of sales, but they can't take it out of their head and put it into the business.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just trying to help them because entrepreneurs are the lifeblood of both of our countries,
Totally.
right? We're the ones that drive everything,
Yeah.
and it's hard to do it on your own. It's hard to
It
have all
is.
the answers.
It is.
So, and to me, it's we're having a conversation. We haven't, no, we've known each other for what, like an hour and 7 minutes. Like we're good friends.
Yeah.
Um, it's just something that happens, and it's sort
Mm.
of like going into a cigar shop um, anywhere in the world. If you walk into a cigar lounge, everybody turns their head and looks at you like, okay, who's this guy? But as soon as you grab a stick, you're one of the brothers,
Yeah.
right, or a sister in
Yeah.
the leaf, and you have something in common. And it doesn't matter the demographic, you have
Mm.
something in common, and you're off to
Yeah.
the races. And sales and cigars kind of go together in my mind. So, and besides, uh, the best name of a podcast I could think of is already taken. Um, Another asshole with a podcast was so.
Love it.
So sales
Love
and
it.
cigars was the second choice.
Sensational. Well, Walter, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. As we bring this to a close, when people want to know more about you, when they want to connect with you, and also how they get access to the podcast, where's the best place for them to do all that?
The simplest place to find me is LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Um, Walter L. Crosby. There's surprisingly only one of me. Um, Helix Sales Development is the website. Um, those two places I'm always trying to give something, some idea, some challenge, something to get people to think differently about sales.
Yeah.
And I do that on LinkedIn. I do that on my blog posts. I have, and the podcast is everywhere you get podcasts.
Hmm.
Um, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, it's there. Um, and I try to keep those entertaining, visually interesting, and good production. So check it
Brilliant.
out.
Awesome. We'll do. I'll put all that in the show notes and highly encourage, as I have, to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I'm certainly going to check out your podcast. So, Walter, I know it's getting later in the evening now in Detroit, but I want to thank you for being a great conversationalist, sharing your thoughts on sales and sales leadership, and thanks for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
I truly appreciate the opportunity, and we'll see about some reciprocity on my sales, on my podcast.
Love it. Good on you, mate.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.